In the heart of a bustling city, where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and cars honked endlessly, there was an old woman who seemed to blend into the background. She wasn't loud or flashy, just a quiet figure sitting on a park bench near the subway station. Her clothes were worn out, her shoes scuffed, and her hands clasped tightly around a battered leather bag that looked like it had seen better days. People passed by her, everyday business people in sharp suits clutching briefcases, parents dragging toddlers behind them, tourists snapping pictures of everything. But no one ever stopped to notice her. The old woman's name was Eleanor Carlisle. Though most people didn't know that. To the world, she was just another faceless person fading into the urban chaos. Some assumed she was homeless. Others thought she might be begging for change, even though she never asked for anything. Few teenagers once laughed at her when she dropped her scarf on the ground, leaving it there until someone else accidentally kicked it aside. Even the baristas at the nearby cafe, who served hundreds of customers daily, barely glanced her way as they handed over cups of coffee. One cold afternoon, snow began falling lightly over the city, coating the streets and benches with a thin layer of white. It was unusually chilly, and the wind bit at anyone brave enough to step outside. Eleanor shivered under her threadbare coat, pulling it tighter around herself. Her frail legs trembled as she tried to stand up from the bench, but her strength failed her. With a soft groan, she sank back down, her scarf slipping from her shoulders onto the wet pavement. A group of young adults walked past, laughing loudly about something funny one of them had said. They didn't even glance at Eleanor struggling to pick up her scarf. Another man hurried by, his phone pressed to his ear, completely oblivious to her plight. It felt like the entire world had forgotten she existed, or worse, chosen to ignore her. That's when a boy appeared. He couldn't have been more than 12 years old, with bright, curious eyes and a mop of curly hair peeking out from under his woolen cap. His jacket wasn't fancy. It looked like it had been patched up a few times, but it kept him warm against the biting cold. The boy paused mid-step when he saw Eleanor sitting alone on the bench, her scarf lying forgotten on the ground. For a moment, he hesitated, glancing around to see if anyone else was going to help. But when no one moved, he crossed the street toward her. "Ma'am?" The boy said softly, bending down to retrieve the scarf. "Are you okay?" Eleanor looked up, startled. It wasn't often that someone spoke directly to her these days. Her lips quivered slightly as she nodded. "I'm fine, thank you," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the hum of traffic. "Just having trouble getting up." Without hesitation, the boy held out his hand. "Here, let me help you." For a second, Eleanor hesitated. She wasn't used to kindness anymore, not after years of being ignored. But then she placed her trembling hand in his, and with surprising gentleness, the boy helped her to her feet. Once she was steady, he draped the scarf back around her neck and brushed some snowflakes off her coat. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Most people don't see me anymore." The boy smiled warmly. "Well, I see you," he replied simply. Then, tilting his head, he added, "Do you need anything? Are you hungry? Cold?" Eleanor shook her head, though her stomach had been empty for hours. "No, I'm all right," she lied. "But thank you for asking." The boy lingered for a moment longer, chatting about school and how much he hated math homework. Despite herself, Eleanor found herself smiling. There was something about this boy, his sincerity, his openness, that made her feel seen again. Even if only for a few minutes. Before leaving, the boy glanced at the shelter across the street. "It's really cold today," he said. "Maybe you should go inside and warm up. Do you want me to walk you there?" Eleanor hesitated. She hadn't set foot in a shelter in years, not since she decided to live quietly among strangers. But something about the boy's genuine concern made her nod. "All right," she said softly. Thank you." Together, they crossed the street, the boy staying close to make sure she didn't slip on the icy sidewalk. As they walked, Eleanor couldn't help but marvel at the unexpected turn her day had taken. For months, maybe even years, she had sat on that bench, invisible to the world. Yet here was this child, a stranger, who had stopped to help her. Without expecting anything in return, at the entrance of the shelter, the boy waved goodbye. "Take care, ma'am," he said with a grin, "and stay warm." Eleanor watched him disappear into the crowd, her heart swelling with gratitude. She didn't know it yet, but that simple act of kindness would set off a chain of events neither of them could have imagined. All because a boy chose to see her when everyone else looked away. After that chilly afternoon, the boy couldn't stop thinking about the old woman. Something about her stayed with him, her quiet dignity, the way she seemed to carry herself despite her tattered appearance, and the gratitude in her eyes when he helped her. He knew life wasn't always fair, but seeing someone so overlooked made him feel a deep sense of sadness. That evening, as he sat at the kitchen table finishing his homework, he told his mom about what happened. His mom, a hard-working woman who juggled 2 jobs to make ends meet, listened intently. She had raised him to be kind and empathetic, often reminding him that even small acts of kindness could mean the world to someone. When he described how everyone ignored the old woman except for him, her expression softened. "You did the right thing," she said, giving him an approving nod. "But maybe you should check on her again if you can. Sometimes people need more than just one good deed." The next day, after school, the boy returned to the park bench where he'd first met the old woman. Sure enough, she was there, sitting quietly with her hands resting on her leather bag. This time, however, she looked up almost immediately when she saw him approaching. A faint smile spread across her face, and she patted the empty space beside her. "You came back," she said, her voice warm but tinged with surprise. "Of course," the boy replied, settling down next to her. "I wanted to make sure you're okay." They talked for a while. At first, the conversation was simple. He asked her if she'd eaten, if she was staying warm, if she needed anything. But as they kept talking, the old woman began opening up. Her name was Eleanor, she told him, and she used to live in a big house uptown. She spoke fondly of her late husband, who had been a successful businessman, and their son, who had tragically passed away in an accident years ago. Losing them both had left her heartbroken, and over time she withdrew from the world. Slowly, she sold off most of her belongings and moved into a tiny apartment, living a life far removed from the wealth and privilege she once knew. As she spoke, the boy listened carefully, hanging on to every word. It was clear that Eleanor had lived through immense pain, yet there was still a spark of resilience in her eyes. He couldn't help but admire her strength, even as she admitted feeling invisible to the rest of the world. Over the following weeks, the boy visited Eleanor regularly. Sometimes he brought her food, a sandwich, or a thermos of hot soup his mom had prepared. Other times, he simply sat with her, chatting about school, books, or whatever came to mind. On weekends, he helped her tidy up her small apartment, sweeping the floor and organizing her things. In return, Eleanor shared bits and pieces of her extraordinary past. She told him stories about traveling the world, attending glamorous parties, and investing in businesses that grew into massive successes. But she also spoke candidly about the loneliness that followed her losses and how she chose to step away from the spotlight entirely. One day, during one of their conversations, Eleanor reached into her leather bag and pulled out a small envelope. She handed it to the boy without explanation, her expression unreadable. "This is for you," she said simply. "Open it later." Curious but respectful, the boy thanked her and tucked the envelope into his backpack. Later that evening, when he got home, he opened it cautiously, unsure of what to expect. Inside was a check made out to him for $10,000. His jaw dropped. He stared at the check for several moments, trying to process what he was seeing. $10,000? It was more money than he'd ever seen in his life. His mom, overhearing his gasp of shock, rushed over to see what had happened. When she saw the check, her eyes widened. "We can't keep this," she said firmly, shaking her head. "It's too much. We have to give it back." The boy nodded reluctantly. He understood why his mom felt that way. It wasn't their money. After all, but part of him couldn't help feeling touched by the gesture. The very next day, they went back to Eleanor's apartment to return the check. When they arrived, Eleanor greeted them warmly, inviting them inside. The boy held out the check, explaining that they couldn't accept such a generous gift. But, to their surprise, Eleanor refused to take it back. "You've reminded me of what it means to care," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "Consider it a thank you for your kindness. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever, a reason to believe in people again." Despite their protests, Eleanor wouldn't budge. Eventually, the boy's mom relented, though she insisted they use the money wisely. They decided to put it toward fixing up their cramped apartment, buying groceries, and setting aside a little for emergencies. For the first time in years, they felt a glimmer of financial security, and it was all because of Eleanor. As the weeks turned into months, the bond between the boy, his mom, and Eleanor grew stronger. They weren't just helping her anymore. They were becoming a family of sorts. Eleanor started opening up even more, sharing details about her life that hinted at her incredible wealth. She mentioned owning properties scattered across the country, stocks worth millions, and access to offshore accounts containing billions. Yet despite her fortune, she continued living modestly, choosing to remain hidden from the public eye. One evening, as they sat together in her cozy apartment, Eleanor revealed the truth. She hadn't always been the quiet, unassuming woman they knew today. Decades earlier, she had been one of the richest women in America, known for her sharp business acumen and philanthropic efforts. But after losing her loved ones, she retreated from society, keeping her wealth locked away while she lived a life of solitude. "I've been testing humanity," she admitted with a wistful smile. "Sitting on that bench, watching how people treat someone they think has nothing. And you, young man, you reminded me that not everyone has forgotten how to care." The boy didn't fully understand the weight of her words at the time, but he could see the sincerity in her eyes. Little did he know, Eleanor's revelation was only the beginning of a journey that would change their lives forever. As the months rolled by, the boy and his mom became a regular part of Eleanor's life. They weren't just visitors anymore. They were her support system, her companions, and in many ways, her family. Every weekend, they would visit her apartment, bringing fresh groceries, cleaning supplies, or sometimes just their presence. Eleanor loved having them around. She would sit on her worn but comfortable armchair, sipping tea while sharing stories from her past. The boy soaked up every word, fascinated by the life she described, a world of luxury, travel, and influence that seemed so far removed from the quiet existence she led now. One evening, as they sat together in her cozy living room, Eleanor surprised them with an invitation. "Tomorrow night," she said, her voice carrying a note of excitement, "I'd like you both to join me for dinner at a restaurant downtown." The boy blinked, caught off guard. He had never seen Eleanor dressed up. Before, she always wore simple clothes, practical and unassuming. But the thought of dining out with her sparked curiosity. His mom hesitated for a moment, unsure if it was appropriate given their modest means, but Eleanor insisted. "It's my treat," she said firmly, leaving no room for argument. The next evening, they arrived at the restaurant, a fancy place with chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and waiters in crisp uniforms gliding between tables. Eleanor looked stunning, dressed in an elegant gown that hinted at the wealth she once possessed. Her silver hair was styled neatly, and a delicate necklace sparkled against her skin. The boy and his mom exchanged glances, feeling slightly out of place in their casual outfits, but Eleanor didn't seem to notice or care. She smiled warmly as they took their seats, clearly enjoying the evening. Over dinner, Eleanor revealed more about herself. She explained that she had spent years building her fortune through smart investments in real estate and technology startups. At one point, she had been celebrated as a visionary leader, invited to speak at conferences, and honored by prestigious organizations. But after losing her husband and son, she walked away from the spotlight, choosing instead to live quietly and anonymously. "I wanted to see how people would treat me if I didn't have money or status," she admitted, her voice tinged with sadness. "And for the most part, I was ignored. People saw me as invisible, until you came along." She turned to the boy, her eyes soft with gratitude. "You reminded me that kindness still exists, that not everyone has forgotten how to care. And because of that, I've decided to make some changes." The boy leaned forward, intrigued. "What kind of changes?" Eleanor smiled. "I want to use my resources to help others, to give back to communities that need it most, starting with yours." She gestured toward the boy and his mom. "You too will be part of this journey. Together, we'll create opportunities for people who deserve a chance." The boy's mom looked overwhelmed, shaking her head slightly. "We're just ordinary people," she said softly. "Are you sure about this?" "Absolutely," Eleanor replied without hesitation. "Ordinary people can do extraordinary things when given the chance. Besides, you've already proven yourselves through your kindness. That's all I need to know." Over the following weeks, Eleanor wasted no time putting her plan into action. She hired lawyers and financial advisors to set up foundations and charitable initiatives aimed at improving the boys' neighborhood. New parks were built where empty lots used to sit. A community center opened its doors, offering free classes in art, music, and computer skills. Affordable housing projects began transforming rundown buildings into safe, welcoming homes for families struggling to make ends meet. News of Eleanor's resurgence spread quickly, shocking those who had once dismissed her as a homeless woman. Reporters camped outside her apartment building, eager to interview the mysterious billionaire who had reemerged from obscurity. But Eleanor remained private, declining interviews and allowing the boy and his mom to represent her publicly. The boy, life changed in ways he could never have imagined. Suddenly, he found himself stepping into roles he hadn't prepared for, attending meetings with city officials, speaking at events, and helping oversee the projects Eleanor funded. At first, he felt nervous, worried he wouldn't measure up. But Eleanor encouraged him every step of the way, reminding him that his perspective mattered. "You've lived in this community your whole life," she told him one day. "You understand what it needs better than anyone else. Trust yourself." With Eleanor's guidance, the boy grew more confident. He started dreaming big, imagining a future where everyone had access to education, healthcare, and opportunities to thrive. Inspired by Eleanor's generosity, he launched his own initiative to combat homelessness, organizing fundraisers and awareness campaigns. Together, they proved that compassion and determination could overcome any obstacle. But success came with challenges. Some people accused the boy and his mom of exploiting Eleanor for her money, spreading rumors online and making hateful comments. At school, classmates teased him about his newfound status, calling him names and excluding him from games. It hurt, but Eleanor reminded him that true character shines brightest in adversity. "They don't know your heart," she said one evening, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Let your actions speak for themselves. That's all that matters." Through it all, the boy stayed focused on the mission. He knew the work they were doing was important, not just for his neighborhood, but for the countless lives they were touching. And with Eleanor by his side, he felt unstoppable. By the end of the year, the transformation in the community was remarkable. Streets that had once been lined with abandoned buildings now buzzed with activity. Families moved into newly renovated apartments, children played in the new park, and adults learned valuable skills at the community center. Eleanor's investments in renewable energy startups earned her praise as a forward-thinking leader, but she remained humble, crediting the boy and his mom for inspiring her comeback. As the boy stood on stage at a local event, addressing a crowd of cheering neighbors, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. None of this would have been possible without Eleanor, and none of it would have started without a simple act of kindness on a cold winter afternoon. Little did he know, the best was yet to come. As time went on, the boy's life became a whirlwind of activity. With Eleanor's support, he found himself stepping into roles that felt bigger than him, roles he never imagined he'd take on at such a young age. He attended meetings with city officials, spoke at community events, and even helped oversee the projects Eleanor funded. At first, it was overwhelming. The boy often doubted himself, wondering if he was truly cut out for this kind of responsibility. But Eleanor had a way of calming his fears. "You don't need to have all the answers," she told him one evening as they sat in her cozy apartment, sipping hot chocolate. "You just need to care. That's what makes you different." Her words stuck with him. Slowly but surely, the boy began to find his footing. He realized that he didn't have to be perfect, he just had to be genuine. And that authenticity resonated with people. Neighbors who once barely noticed him now greeted him warmly on the street. Teachers at school praised him for his leadership. And even some of the kids who teased him started coming around, asking how they could get involved in the initiatives he was working on, but not everything was smooth sailing. As news of Eleanor's wealth and generosity spread, so did rumors. Some people accused the boy and his mom of exploiting Eleanor for her money, claiming they were only helping her to benefit themselves. Others whispered that Eleanor must have ulterior motives, suggesting she was using her charity work to boost her public image. Online comment sections lit up with negativity, and the boy found himself scrolling through hateful messages late at night, feeling hurt and confused. One particularly rough day, after hearing cruel remarks from classmates at school, the boy came home in tears. His mom hugged him tightly, letting him cry it out before sitting him down for a talk. "People will always say things," she said gently. "But you know why you're doing this, and so does Eleanor. That's what matters. Don't let their words change who you are." The next morning, Eleanor called the boy over to her apartment. When he arrived, she handed him a worn-out photo album. Inside were pictures of her younger days, smiling alongside her husband at glamorous parties, standing proudly beside her son at his graduation, shaking hands with world leaders at conferences. Each photo told a story of a life filled with love, success, and purpose. "I've been where you are now," Eleanor said softly, pointing to a picture of herself speaking at a podium. "When I first started my business, people doubted me too. They said I was too young, too inexperienced, too ambitious. But I didn't let their opinions stop me. Instead, I focused on what I believed in." She looked at him, her eyes steady and kind. "Don't let fear or doubt hold you back. You're doing something incredible here. Keep going." Her words gave the boy strength. From that day forward, he decided to tune out the negativity and focus on the work that mattered. He threw himself into the projects, organizing fundraisers, rallying volunteers, and spreading awareness about the issues facing his community. With each small victory, a new park opening, a family moving into affordable housing, a child learning to code at the community center, the boy felt a growing sense of accomplishment. Meanwhile, Eleanor continued to inspire those around her. Her charitable efforts expanded beyond the neighborhood, reaching other underserved communities across the country. She invested in renewable energy startups, funding innovations that promised to create jobs and reduce environmental impact. She partnered with schools to provide scholarships for underprivileged students, ensuring they had access to quality education. And she worked tirelessly to build affordable housing, giving families a safe place to call home. Despite her global influence, Eleanor remained humble. She rarely gave interviews, preferring to let her actions speak for themselves. When reporters pressed her for details about her past, she simply smiled and said, "I'm just trying to make the world a little better one step at a time." For the boy, watching Eleanor navigate her return to the public eye was both inspiring and humbling. He admired her ability to stay grounded despite her immense wealth and influence. More than anything, he admired the way she treated everyone with respect, no matter their background or circumstances. Whether she was speaking with a CEO or chatting with a neighbor, Eleanor made people feel seen and valued. As the boy entered high school, he carried Eleanor's lessons with him. He dreamed of becoming a social entrepreneur, someone who could use business skills to solve real-world problems. With Eleanor's mentorship, he launched his own initiative to combat homelessness. He organized food drives, collected donations for shelters, and advocated for policy changes to address the root causes of poverty. His efforts earned him recognition not just locally, but nationally, yet even as his profile grew, the boy stayed true to himself. He remembered Eleanor's advice, "Let your actions speak for themselves." So instead of seeking fame or attention, he poured his energy into making a difference. He visited shelters, listened to people's stories, and worked alongside volunteers to serve meals and distribute supplies. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was meaningful, and that's what kept him going. Eleanor watched the boy grow with pride, knowing she had played a role in shaping the person he was becoming. One evening, as they sat together on her balcony overlooking the city, she turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you hadn't stopped to help me that day?" she asked. The boy paused, considering the question. "Yeah, I guess I do," he admitted. "But then I think about how much has changed since then, not just for me, but for everyone whose lives we've touched. It makes me grateful." Eleanor nodded, her eyes glistening. "Gratitude is a powerful thing," she said quietly. "It reminds us of how far we've come and inspires us to keep going." The boy smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection to the woman who had become like a grandmother to him. Together, they had accomplished more than either of them could have imagined. And though challenges still lay ahead, they faced them with courage, knowing they weren't alone. Little did they know, their journey was far from over. There were still dreams to chase, battles to fight, and lives to change. But one thing was certain: the bond they shared and the legacy they were building would endure long after they were gone. Years passed, and the boy grew into a young man with a heart full of purpose. The lessons he had learned from Eleanor stayed with him, shaping not only his actions but also his dreams for the future. By the time he graduated from high school, he was already making waves as an advocate for social justice. His initiatives to combat homelessness had gained national attention, earning him awards and recognition. But none of that mattered to him as much as the lives he touched, the families who finally had roofs over their heads, the children who dared to dream again, and the elders who found dignity in their later years. Eleanor, now well into her 80s, watched his journey with pride. Though her health had begun to decline, her spirit remained unbreakable. She continued to fund projects that uplifted communities, always encouraging the young man to lead the way. Together they had transformed not just their own neighborhood, but countless others. Yet despite all the success, Eleanor never lost sight of what truly mattered: kindness, compassion, and the belief that everyone deserved a chance to thrive. One evening, as the young man visited Eleanor in her apartment, she greeted him with a warm smile, but there was something different about her demeanor. Her movements were slower, her voice softer. Still, she insisted on sitting by the window, gazing out at the city lights twinkling below. For a moment, they sat in silence, the bond between them needing no words. Finally, Eleanor spoke. "I've been thinking," she said, her tone thoughtful, "about how much you've grown since we first met. Do you remember that day?" The young man chuckled. "How could I forget? You were sitting on that bench, bundled up against the cold. Everyone ignored you except me." Eleanor nodded, her eyes distant. "You saw me when no one else did. And because of that, I decided to see the world differently, too. You reminded me that humanity isn't lost, it's just waiting to be awakened." She reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong despite her frailty. "I don't have much time left," she admitted softly. "But before I go, I want you to know something. Everything I've built, everything I've worked for, it's yours now. Not just the money, but the responsibility to keep this legacy alive." Tears welled up in the young man's eyes. He tried to protest, to tell her that he couldn't possibly take on such a monumental task, but she silenced him with a look. "You've already proven yourself," she said firmly. "You've shown me and the world that kindness can change lives. Now it's your turn to carry the torch." Over the next few months, Eleanor prepared him for what lay ahead. She introduced him to her team of advisors, walked him through her investments, and shared her vision for the future. She wanted him to continue funding education programs, affordable housing projects, and renewable energy initiatives. Most importantly, she urged him to stay grounded, to always remember where he came from and why he started this journey. Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep. The young man felt a profound sense of loss. But he also felt gratitude for the time they had shared, for the lessons she had taught him, and for the trust she had placed in him. At her memorial service, he stood before a crowd of hundreds, many of whom had benefited from her generosity. Holding back tears, he delivered a heartfelt speech. Eleanor wasn't just a woman with immense wealth, he began, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. She was a woman with an even greater heart. She taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in the lives we touch and the love we give. She chose to see people when others looked away, and she gave me the courage to do the same. As he spoke, he realized that Eleanor's legacy wasn't just about the foundations she had built or the millions she had donated. It was about the ripple effect of her kindness, the way she had inspired others to believe in themselves and in the power of compassion. And now it was his turn to carry that torch in the years that followed. The young man dedicated himself to honoring Eleanor's memory. He expanded her foundations, reaching communities around the world. He partnered with organizations tackling issues like climate change, poverty, and inequality, ensuring that her vision lived on. Inspired by her story, he wrote a book titled The Power of Seeing, recounting how a single act of kindness had changed everything, not just for him, but for countless others. The book became a bestseller, touching hearts across the globe. Readers connected with its message that everyone has value, no matter how invisible they may seem. Schools invited him to speak, eager for him to share his experiences with students. Businesses sought his advice on creating meaningful corporate social responsibility programs. Through it all, he remained humble, crediting Eleanor for showing him the way. Back in his hometown, the community Eleanor had helped transform continued to thrive. The park she had funded became a gathering place for families, filled with laughter and joy. The community center buzzed with activity, offering classes and workshops that empowered people of all ages. Affordable housing projects provided stability for struggling families, giving them hope for a brighter future. Everywhere he looked, the young man saw evidence of Eleanor's impact and his own. One sunny afternoon, he returned to the park bench where it had all begun. Sitting down, he closed his eyes and let the memories wash over him. He thought about that cold winter day when he had stopped to help an old woman who seemed invisible to the world. He thought about the conversations they had shared, the laughter, the tears, and the dreams they had built together. And he thought about how far they had come, how a single act of kindness had sparked a chain reaction that changed lives. Opening his eyes, he noticed a group of kids playing nearby. One of them, a scruffy little boy with bright eyes, caught his attention. The boy tripped and fell, scraping his knee, and immediately burst into tears. Without hesitation, another child, a girl wearing a colorful scarf, rushed to his side, helping him up and brushing dirt off his pants. The young man smiled, watching the scene unfold. It was a small moment, but it reminded him of why he kept going. Kindness, no matter how small, could create ripples that spread farther than anyone imagined. As he stood up to leave, he whispered a silent thank you to Eleanor, knowing she would have been proud. And so, the boy who had once helped an invisible woman rose to greatness, not because of wealth or fame, but because of the love and compassion he carried in his heart. Eleanor's legacy lived on through him, proving that sometimes the simplest gestures could lead to the most extraordinary outcomes.